settle into the sleepy mind channel. Tonight, we are traveling to the rolling green hills of New Zealand's North Island, where one of the most extraordinary natural wonders on Earth has been quietly waiting for millions of years. Hidden beneath peaceful farmland is a vast network of limestone caves, unlike anywhere else in the world. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people travel from across the globe to visit a place where an underground river winds through complete darkness beneath a ceiling illuminated by countless tiny blue lights. The sight is so unexpected that many visitors compare it to drifting beneath a clear night sky filled with stars, even though they are deep below the surface of the Earth. These are the famous Waitomo glowworm caves, a destination that has fascinated explorers, scientists, photographers, and travelers for more than a century. Yet despite welcoming visitors from nearly every continent, many people have never heard of them until they begin planning a trip to New Zealand. Tonight, we will discover how these remarkable caves formed over more than 30 million years, why the glowworms exist nowhere else on Earth, how Maori explorers knew these caverns centuries before the outside world, and how one of nature's smallest creatures transformed an ancient cave into one of the most unforgettable places on the planet. If you enjoy videos like these, feel free to like and subscribe. More videos are posted weekly, and if you would like even more relaxing stories after this one, be sure to explore the playlists on the channel. You'll find dozens of guided sleep stories covering ancient civilizations, remarkable places, fascinating wildlife, astronomy, geology, plants, hidden cities, and many other subjects, all designed for peaceful, all-night listening while learning something new. Now, as we begin our journey, picture yourself standing among the gentle hills of the Waikato region, about 120 miles, or nearly 200 kilometers, south of New Zealand's largest city, Auckland. The countryside feels calm and familiar. Sheep graze across lush green pastures. Small farms stretch across the landscape. Narrow country roads weave between low hills, covered with native trees and ferns. Nothing about the scenery suggests that directly beneath your feet lies an underground world that has been evolving since long before humans existed. From above, Waitomo appears almost ordinary. Only after stepping through the entrance does it become clear that the landscape hides one of the greatest geological treasures in the southern hemisphere. The name Waitomo comes from the Maori language and offers the first clue about the remarkable world concealed below. The word combines wai, meaning water, with tomo, meaning a hole, shaft, or entrance descending into the earth. Together they describe exactly what generations of Maori had known long before these caves appeared on maps or in travel guides. Rainwater disappeared into openings in the limestone hills, carving hidden passages that could only be explored by following the underground streams. For centuries, local Maori communities understood this landscape through careful observation, oral tradition, and first-hand exploration. The caves were never a forgotten place waiting to be discovered. They were already part of the cultural history of the region, long before Europeans arrived in New Zealand. Their knowledge of the rivers, cave entrances, and surrounding forests allowed later explorers to venture farther into the underground passages than would otherwise have been possible. One of the most important moments in the cave's recorded history came in the year 1887, when Maori chief Tane Tinorau joined English surveyor Fred Mace to explore deeper sections of the cave together. Using nothing more than a handmade raft and the light of flickering candles, they floated quietly along the underground river, entering chambers that very few people had ever seen. As the darkness surrounded them, thousands of tiny blue lights gradually appeared overhead. Neither man was looking at reflections or unusual minerals embedded in the stone. Instead, they had found an enormous colony of living insects whose soft glow transformed the cave ceiling into something that looked remarkably like the Milky Way, stretching across a perfectly clear night sky. News of their journey gradually spread beyond the Waikato region, and before long travelers began making the difficult trip to witness the glowing caverns for themselves. When the Waitomo glowworm caves officially opened to visitors in the year 1906, reaching them was far more challenging than it is today. Roads across New Zealand were still developing, automobiles were uncommon, and long-distance travel required patience. Even so, people willingly made the journey because there was simply nothing else quite like it anywhere in the world. Over the decades, improvements in transportation allowed more visitors to experience the caves, and today they welcome hundreds of thousands of guests every year while remaining one of New Zealand's most recognizable natural attractions. Guides continue leading small groups through many of the same passages explored well over a century ago, carefully protecting an ecosystem that is both beautiful and surprisingly fragile. Artificial lighting is kept to a minimum, photography is restricted in some areas, voices remain low, and boats glide without engines through the still water to preserve the quiet atmosphere that has defined Waitomo for countless generations. Although modern visitors enjoy comfortable walkways and carefully maintained paths, the underground landscape itself has changed very little. The limestone walls continue growing almost too slowly to measure. Water still follows the same patient course through the rock. The glowworms continue producing their mysterious blue light, just as their ancestors did thousands of years before the first travelers arrived. The remarkable thing about Waitomo is that no single event created it. The caves exist because countless natural processes work together over unimaginably long periods of time. An ancient tropical sea once covered this entire region, leaving behind layer upon layer of tiny marine shells that slowly became limestone. Rainwater gradually dissolved that limestone, creating narrow cracks that widened into tunnels, then chambers, and eventually an intricate network of underground rivers stretching beneath the countryside. Long after the caves had formed, a tiny species of insect evolved an extraordinary ability to produce light, taking advantage of the cool, humid darkness in ways found nowhere else on Earth. Human history arrived only at the very end of that story. Every visitor who steps inside is witnessing the result of millions of years of geology, biology, climate, and time working together with remarkable patience. To understand why this peaceful cave has become one of the world's most unforgettable destinations, we first have to travel back to an age when New Zealand looked nothing like it does today, when these green hills rested beneath warm tropical waters, and the first chapter of Waitomo's story was only just beginning. Millions of years before the first glowworm illuminated the darkness, before the first underground river carried a silent boat, and long before New Zealand appeared on any map, the landscape surrounding Waitomo was almost impossible to recognize. The gentle green hills that visitors see today did not yet exist. Instead, This entire region rested beneath the warm waters of a shallow tropical sea. It is a surprising thought, especially for anyone standing among the rolling farmland above the caves. The same fields where sheep graze today were once covered by clear ocean water, filled with an abundance of marine life. Fish swam where roads now wind through the countryside. Coral communities flourished beneath the surface, while countless tiny shell-producing organisms drifted with the currents. For millions upon millions of years, generation after generation lived, died, and settled gently onto the seabed. No single event transformed the landscape. The process was so gradual that no living creature could ever have noticed it happening. Yet those tiny remains would eventually become the foundation of one of the world's most remarkable cave systems. The ancient sea covering this part of the southern hemisphere looked very different from the cool waters surrounding New Zealand today. Earth's climate was considerably warmer, and sea levels were often much higher than they are in the modern world. Sunlight reached the relatively shallow ocean floor, creating an environment where marine organisms thrived. Some were large enough to be easily recognized, but many were microscopic, invisible to the naked eye. Tiny plankton drifted through the water, while shellfish, corals, sea lilies, and countless other creatures built delicate skeletons from calcium carbonate, a naturally occurring mineral dissolved within the seawater. Although each shell was incredibly small, the number produced over millions of years became almost beyond imagination. Every tide delivered another thin layer to the ocean floor. Every storm shifted sediments from one place to another. Every generation added another page to an ever-growing geological record that would remain hidden beneath the earth for tens of millions of years. As these layers became thicker, their own tremendous weight slowly compressed everything beneath them. Water trapped between the grains was gradually squeezed away, while minerals dissolved and crystallized, acting like a natural cement that locked countless shells together into solid stone. This transformation did not happen over centuries or even thousands of years. It unfolded across spans of time so vast that entire species appeared and disappeared while the rock changed almost imperceptibly. Eventually, the loose marine sediments became limestone, a pale stone found across many parts of the world, but especially well suited to forming caves. Unlike harder rocks such as granite, limestone is surprisingly vulnerable to slightly acidic water. That characteristic would eventually allow nature to carve enormous underground chambers without the need for earthquakes, volcanoes, or violent geological upheaval. While the limestone was quietly forming beneath the ancient sea, the continents themselves were also changing shape. New Zealand traces its origins to the great southern supercontinent known as Gondwana, a vast landmass that once connected what are now Antarctica, Australia, South America, Africa, the Indian subcontinent, and several smaller fragments. Beginning many millions of years earlier, powerful forces deep within the Earth slowly pulled these continents apart. The movement was extraordinarily slow, often measuring only a few centimeters each year, about as quickly as human fingernails grow. Yet given enough time, those tiny movements reshaped the entire planet. New Zealand gradually separated from what would become Australia, carrying with it ancient rocks, forests, and ecosystems that would evolve in remarkable isolation. That long separation helps explain why so many of New Zealand's plants and animals are found nowhere else on Earth, including the tiny glowing inhabitants that would one day make Waitomo famous. The limestone itself remained buried for millions of years before another series of geological forces gently lifted portions of the ancient seabed above the ocean's surface. As the land slowly rose, rivers began carving valleys across the young landscape, while rain fell onto hills that had once rested beneath tropical waves. Every raindrop carried a small amount of carbon dioxide absorbed from the atmosphere and surrounding soil, creating an extremely weak natural acid. It was far too mild to harm plants, animals, or people, yet over immense periods of time, it proved surprisingly effective at dissolving limestone. Water seeped into tiny cracks that were almost invisible at first. Those cracks widened ever so slightly. More water entered, dissolving a little more rock each year. Over thousands of years, narrow fractures became passages. Over hundreds of thousands of years, those passages expanded into tunnels large enough for flowing streams. Given millions of years, nature created great chambers capable of holding entire forests if they had been above ground. Unlike dramatic landscapes shaped by volcanic eruptions or powerful earthquakes, Waitomo was created through extraordinary patience. Nothing about its formation was sudden. The cave grew because water never stopped flowing. Each season brought more rainfall. Every storm sent fresh water filtering into the limestone. Every passing century enlarged the underground passages by an amount almost impossible to measure without modern instruments. Nature repeated the same quiet process again and again until a hidden world began taking shape beneath the hills. It was still completely dark, completely silent, and entirely unknown to any human being. Yet the foundations of the caves had finally been laid, and before long, another remarkable partnership between water and stone would begin creating the graceful formations that now hang from the ceilings and rise from the cave floor, slowly decorating the underground landscape, one mineral-rich drop at a time. Water did far more than carve empty spaces through the limestone. As it slowly made its way underground, it also carried tiny amounts of dissolved calcium carbonate picked up from the surrounding rock. While moving through narrow cracks and hidden channels, the water remained under pressure and held these minerals in solution. Everything changed the moment a droplet reached the ceiling of an open chamber. As it emerged into the cave, a small amount of carbon dioxide escaped into the air, changing the chemistry of the droplet ever so slightly. The dissolved minerals could no longer remain suspended within the water, so they settled onto the rock below as an almost invisible crystalline layer. One droplet left behind almost nothing. Another followed a few seconds later, then another and another. The process repeated every hour of every day, through every season, for thousands upon thousands of years. Eventually, those microscopic deposits accumulated into the graceful stone formations that have become some of the cave's most recognizable features. The formations hanging from the ceilings are known as stalactites, while those rising upward from the cave floor are called stalagmites. Many visitors remember the difference by thinking that stalactites hold tightly to the ceiling, while stalagmites might eventually reach upward to meet them. Although the names are easy to remember, their growth is astonishingly slow. Under favorable conditions, many limestone formations lengthen by only a few millimeters in an entire century. Some of the largest formations inside Waitomo may have required hundreds of thousands of years to reach their present size. A slender stalactite that appears delicate enough to snap with a touch is actually a monument to immense stretches of geological time, patiently constructed by countless individual droplets of water. Not every formation develops in the same way. Some remain thin and hollow, forming delicate mineral tubes, sometimes called soda straws, because of their narrow shape. Water travels through the center of these tiny tubes before releasing another microscopic ring of calcite at the tip. If the tube eventually becomes blocked, water begins flowing along the outside instead, allowing a thicker stalactite to develop. Elsewhere in the cave, minerals spread across broad surfaces to create smooth curtains that resemble folded fabric hanging from the ceiling. Some appear almost translucent when illuminated by carefully placed lights, revealing subtle bands of cream, amber, and pale brown produced by traces of different minerals carried within the water. Others twist into unusual shapes, as changing airflow or variations in water flow gently alter the direction of growth over thousands of years. Beneath many stalactites, water continues falling onto the cave floor. Each droplet deposits another tiny layer of calcite exactly where it lands, allowing stalagmites to slowly rise from below. Given enough time, the formations above and below may eventually meet, creating a solid limestone column that appears to support the ceiling itself. Some columns inside cave systems around the world measure many yards across, but even those impressive structures began with nothing more than individual drops of water falling through empty space. Waitomo contains examples of every stage in this slow process, offering a remarkable glimpse into geological change that is still taking place today. Unlike ancient fossils that preserve a moment from the distant past, these formations remain alive in a geological sense, continuing to grow with every passing year. The cave environment plays an essential role in protecting this delicate process. Deep underground, temperatures remain remarkably stable throughout the year, changing very little despite seasonal weather outside. Humidity stays consistently high, helping prevent formations from drying too quickly, while maintaining conditions that allow mineral-rich water to continue flowing. Even slight changes in airflow, moisture, or carbon dioxide levels can influence how the cave develops over time. For that reason, modern conservation efforts carefully monitor the underground environment. Walkways guide visitors away from the most fragile formations, lighting is used sparingly, and tour groups are managed to reduce unnecessary disturbance. Protecting the cave means protecting processes that operate on a time scale far longer than any human lifetime. As the chambers continued expanding, underground streams found easier paths through the limestone, gradually linking separate passages into a larger network. Some tunnels remained narrow enough that only water could pass through them. Others widened into vast rooms, with ceilings soaring high overhead. Echoes carried across still pools, while the quiet sound of dripping water marked the steady passage of time. Every chamber developed its own character, depending on the direction of flowing water, the thickness of the surrounding limestone, and the countless subtle differences that influenced erosion over millions of years. Together, they formed an intricate underground landscape, stretching beneath the hills of the Waikato region, much of it still hidden from view even today. Yet despite the extraordinary beauty of these limestone halls, they were not the feature that would one day make Waitomo famous around the world. Across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, There are caves with larger chambers, taller columns, and even more elaborate mineral formations. Waitomo's greatest distinction came from a tiny inhabitant that arrived much later, taking advantage of the cool, humid darkness that the caves had spent millions of years creating. Without the limestone, there could be no underground chambers. Without the chambers, there would be no sheltered ceilings above quiet rivers. And without those perfectly stable conditions, one small species of insect could never have evolved into the living constellation that now transforms these ancient caves into one of the most remarkable natural spectacles on Earth. The tiny creatures responsible for Waitomo's famous blue glow are commonly called glowworms, although the name is somewhat misleading. They are not worms at all. Each glowing point of light belongs to the larval stage of a small fungus gnat, known scientifically as Arachnocampa luminosa, a species found naturally only in New Zealand. The adult insect resembles a delicate mosquito with long legs and transparent wings, but it is the juvenile stage that has captured the world's imagination. During this part of its life, the larva develops an extraordinary hunting strategy unlike that of almost any other insect. Hidden in complete darkness, suspended from the cave ceiling, it produces its own light to lure prey into a carefully constructed trap. The life of a glowworm begins as a tiny egg, scarcely larger than the head of a pin. Adult females deposit clusters of eggs on the damp walls and ceilings of caves, where humidity remains high throughout the year. After several weeks, each egg hatches into a minute larva no longer than a grain of rice. At first, these young larvae are almost transparent and far too small to produce the brilliant displays seen inside the famous grotto. Their earliest days are devoted entirely to finding a suitable location where they can spend nearly the rest of their lives. Once a favorable spot has been chosen, usually a section of ceiling above calm air with little disturbance, the larva settles into place and begins constructing a tiny silk nest from which it will hunt. Unlike spiders, which move about their webs when necessary, the glowworm remains almost entirely stationary. Its survival depends on choosing the right location rather than searching for food. From its silk shelter, the larva produces dozens of remarkably fine threads that hang vertically toward the cave floor. Each thread is coated with tiny droplets of sticky mucus that glisten when illuminated by artificial light, though visitors rarely notice them in the darkness. Some of these fishing lines may extend well over a foot in length, gently swaying in the still cave air. A single larva can produce dozens of these threads at the same time, creating an almost invisible curtain beneath its position. When hundreds or even thousands of glowworms occupy the same chamber, the cave ceiling becomes covered by an intricate forest of delicate silk strands waiting patiently for passing insects. The blue light serves one purpose above all others. It attracts food. Tiny flying insects wandering through the darkness instinctively move toward the glow, much as moths are drawn toward porch lights on a summer evening. Believing they have found an opening or perhaps a source of daylight, they fly closer until they collide with one of the sticky threads hanging below. Escape is rarely possible. The adhesive droplets hold the struggling insect in place, while its movements create small vibrations that travel upward along the silk. Perched safely above, the glowworm detects those vibrations almost immediately. It reels in the thread, captures its meal, and then lowers a freshly coated strand to replace the one that has been disturbed. The entire process is remarkably efficient, allowing the larva to conserve energy while waiting patiently for prey to come to it. The glow itself is created through bioluminescence, a natural chemical reaction that occurs inside a specialized organ located near the end of the larva's body. Oxygen combines with unique chemicals through the assistance of specific enzymes, releasing energy in the form of visible blue light. This is similar in principle to the glow produced by fireflies or certain deep-sea creatures, although the chemistry differs from species to species. Scientists have spent decades studying exactly how Arachnocampa luminosa controls its light, discovering that the brightness can change depending on the larva's condition. A hungry glowworm often shines more intensely than one that has recently eaten. By producing a brighter light, it increases the likelihood of attracting insects toward its hanging threads. In other words, the cave's beautiful display is also a vast collection of tiny hunters competing for their next meal. The choice of blue light is no accident. Blue wavelengths travel especially well through the darkness of the cave, creating a clear beacon without requiring enormous amounts of energy. Against the black limestone ceiling, the glow appears almost electric, yet each individual insect is using only a minute amount of power. What visitors experience as a breathtaking underground galaxy is actually the combined light of thousands of larvae, each no larger than the width of a pencil. Together, they create an illusion far greater than the sum of their individual contributions. Reflected in the still water below, those countless blue points seem to stretch into infinity, making even relatively modest chambers feel vast beyond measure. Despite their success as hunters, glowworms spend surprisingly little of their lives as adults. After many months feeding within the cave, each larva forms a small pupa attached to the ceiling. Inside that protective case, its body undergoes an extraordinary transformation. Wings develop, the mouthparts change, legs lengthen. Eventually, an adult fungus gnat emerges into the darkness, no longer glowing and no longer capable of feeding. The adult stage lasts only a few days, sometimes less than a week. Its sole purpose is reproduction. Males search for females, eggs are laid on the cave ceiling, and the cycle begins again. The brief adult life stands in striking contrast to the much longer larval stage, during which nearly all feeding, growth, and the famous glowing display take place. This unusual life cycle means that the magnificent ceiling, admired by visitors, is constantly changing even though it appears timeless. Individual glowworms hatch, grow, pupate, and disappear throughout the year, while new larvae quietly take their place. The living constellation above the underground river is never exactly the same from one season to the next, yet its overall appearance remains remarkably constant. It is a perfect example of nature's quiet balance, where countless individual lives combine to create a spectacle that has endured for generations and continues to captivate everyone fortunate enough to drift beneath its gentle blue light. The glowworms themselves depend on a surprisingly delicate balance. Although they have occupied these caves for thousands of years, their survival is closely tied to the conditions surrounding them. A significant change in temperature, humidity, airflow, or the availability of flying insects can reduce their numbers. The limestone chambers provide an environment that remains remarkably stable throughout the year. Cool air settles within the cave, moisture clings to the walls, and the underground river helps maintain the humidity that both the larvae and their silk threads require. Outside, weather may change dramatically from one season to the next, but deep inside Waitomo, the environment remains almost timeless. That consistency is one of the reasons the glowworms have flourished here, while similar displays are so rare elsewhere in the world. The silk threads themselves are just as remarkable as the glowing insects that produce them. Under normal tour conditions, they remain almost invisible, disappearing completely against the darkness. If the cave were brightly illuminated, visitors would discover thousands upon thousands of nearly transparent strands hanging from the ceiling like delicate crystal rain. Tiny droplets of sticky mucus cling to each thread at regular intervals, acting much like beads on a necklace. Every droplet is carefully spaced, increasing the chances that a passing insect will become trapped before it can fly away. Constructing these traps requires a considerable amount of energy, and maintaining them requires constant attention. Damaged threads must be replaced, while old droplets gradually lose their effectiveness and need to be renewed. Competition exists even among neighboring glowworms. The brightest larvae often attract the greatest number of insects, allowing them to grow more quickly than their neighbors. Researchers have observed that larvae experiencing longer periods without food frequently increase the intensity of their glow, investing more energy into attracting prey when resources become scarce. This creates a fascinating balance across the cave ceiling. Every individual insect is quietly competing for survival, yet together they produce one of nature's most breathtaking spectacles. What appears peaceful to human visitors is, in reality, a busy hunting ground, where thousands of tiny predators patiently wait for the next unsuspecting insect to wander into the darkness. Not every insect survives its encounter with the glowworms, but not every glowworm survives either. The caves contain limited space, and young larvae searching for suitable locations sometimes settle too close to one another. If food becomes scarce, stronger individuals may outcompete weaker neighbors. In extreme cases, glowworms have even been observed feeding on members of their own species caught in nearby silk threads. While this behavior may seem surprising, it reflects the reality of life in an environment where every meal matters. Nature often rewards efficiency rather than abundance, and even within this tranquil underground world, survival depends upon making the most of limited opportunities. The glowworms are not the only living creatures inhabiting the cave system. Tiny insects carried underground by air currents or flowing water provide the primary source of food for the larvae. Small spiders occupy cracks in the limestone, while microscopic fungi and bacteria quietly recycle organic material washed into the caves during periods of heavy rainfall. In nearby passages, where conditions differ slightly, native bats occasionally find sheltered places to roost. Above ground, dense forests of ferns, mosses, and native trees capture rainfall that eventually filters downward through the limestone, continuing the slow geological processes that created the caves in the first place. Every part of the ecosystem is connected. The forests support the insects support the glowworms. The rain sustains both the living organisms and the limestone formations that continue growing one droplet at a time. Scientists continue studying the Waitomo cave system because it offers valuable insights into biology, geology, hydrology, and climate. Researchers monitor carbon dioxide levels, humidity, air circulation, and water quality, looking for even subtle changes that could affect the fragile balance underground. Modern instruments allow scientists to detect variations far too small for visitors to notice, helping managers make informed decisions about protecting the caves for future generations. These studies have shown that something as simple as increasing visitor numbers without proper controls could gradually alter the cave environment. More people breathing inside enclosed chambers raises carbon dioxide levels, while body heat can slightly change local temperatures. Individually, these effects are small, but over many years, they could influence both mineral formation and glowworm populations. For that reason, tourism at Waitomo is carefully managed. Groups enter at scheduled times rather than continuously throughout the day. Lighting is kept to the minimum necessary for safety. Visitors are encouraged to speak quietly, not only to preserve the peaceful atmosphere, but also to respect an environment where sound echoes easily through enclosed chambers. In the glowworm grotto itself, boats move without motors, gliding gently along the underground river to avoid unnecessary noise and vibration. Photography is restricted during parts of the tour, allowing everyone to experience the cave directly, while preventing repeated flashes of bright light that could disturb both wildlife and other visitors. Every precaution reflects the same philosophy. People are welcome to admire this extraordinary place, but only if its delicate balance remains protected. The success of these conservation efforts is evident today. Millions of visitors have experienced the Waitomo glowworm caves since they first opened to the public more than a century ago, yet the underground landscape continues to appear remarkably unchanged. The river still follows its ancient course. Water continues depositing tiny layers of calcite onto stalactites and stalagmites. New generations of glowworms hatch, build their silk threads, illuminate the darkness, and eventually give rise to the next generation. It is a cycle that has continued for thousands of years, and with careful stewardship, should continue for many more. As remarkable as the famous glowworm grotto may be, it represents only a small portion of the wider Waitomo cave network. Hidden beneath the surrounding hills are additional passages, underground rivers, and chambers that remain inaccessible to most visitors. Some have been carefully mapped by explorers and scientists, while others continue revealing new details with each generation of research. Beyond the glowing ceiling lies an even larger underground world, one shaped by water, time, and exploration, where every winding passage hints that nature may still have secrets waiting quietly beneath the green hills of New Zealand. Beyond the well-known glowworm caves, the Waitomo region contains an extensive network of underground passages that extends for many miles beneath the hills of New Zealand's North Island. More than 300 limestone caves have been documented throughout the area, although researchers believe additional passages may still remain undiscovered or only partially explored. Some consist of short tunnels ending in small chambers, while others stretch for miles through twisting corridors carved by ancient rivers. Each cave has developed its own character over millions of years. Some contain broad cathedral-like chambers filled with towering limestone columns. Others feature narrow canyons where water still rushes through polished rock, gradually continuing the patient work of erosion that first began tens of millions of years ago. One of the best-known neighboring caves is Ruakuri Cave, whose name can be translated from Maori as the Cave of Dogs. According to local tradition, Wild dogs were once discovered near its entrance, giving the cave the name by which it is still known today. Unlike the famous glowworm caves, Ruakuri offers visitors a different perspective on the underground landscape. A gently descending spiral walkway carries guests deep below the surface before connecting with a maze of passages where glowworms, limestone formations, and underground streams combine to create an experience that is both familiar and entirely unique. The carefully designed entrance allows people of varying abilities to explore much of the cave while minimizing disturbance to the fragile environment. It is an excellent example of how modern engineering can provide access while respecting the natural landscape. Nearby lies Aranui Cave, another remarkable chamber within the Waitomo system. Although it contains no glowworms, many geologists and experienced guides consider it one of the most beautiful limestone caves in the region because of its extraordinary mineral formations. Delicate stalactites hang in dense clusters from the ceilings, while elegant flowstone curtains drape across the walls in graceful folds. Minerals carried by dripping water have created subtle shades of cream, gold, amber, and soft brown that become visible under carefully positioned lighting. Without the distraction of glowing insects overhead, visitors often notice details that might otherwise be overlooked, appreciating the incredible variety of shapes created by nothing more than mineral-rich water and the passage of time. For those seeking a more adventurous experience, portions of the Waitomo Cave network offer opportunities far beyond the traditional walking tour. One of the region's most famous activities is known as black water rafting. Despite the name, there is no actual whitewater rafting involved. Instead, participants wearing wetsuits, helmets, and headlamps float through underground rivers using large inflatable inner tubes. At times they drift quietly beneath glowing cave ceilings, much like visitors aboard guided boats. At other moments they climb over fallen boulders, squeeze through narrow passages, or gently lower themselves down small waterfalls hidden within the darkness. The adventure combines geology, exploration, and a sense of discovery, while allowing participants to experience sections of the cave system that remain inaccessible during standard tours. Professional cave guides undergo extensive training before leading visitors into these underground environments. Beyond learning the routes themselves, they study cave geology, local history, Maori cultural traditions, emergency procedures, river conditions, and the biology of the glowworms. Conditions underground can change after periods of unusually heavy rainfall, causing water levels to rise or certain passages to become temporarily inaccessible. Guides regularly assess these conditions before tours begin, ensuring that every journey remains both enjoyable and safe. Their knowledge allows visitors to appreciate details that might otherwise go unnoticed, from subtle mineral deposits along the cave walls to the tiny silk threads suspended beneath each glowing lava. Exploration of the Waitomo cave system has continued for well over a century, yet remarkably, not every passage has been fully documented. Modern survey equipment, laser mapping technology, and three-dimensional scanning have dramatically improved scientists' understanding of the underground landscape, revealing intricate networks of chambers connected by hidden waterways. Even so, some flooded sections remain difficult to investigate because they require specialized cave diving equipment and highly trained teams. Cave divers often work in complete darkness with limited visibility, carefully following guidelines through submerged tunnels that may have remained untouched for thousands of years. Their work has expanded knowledge of the region, while reminding researchers that much of the underground world still holds unanswered questions. Water remains the great architect of every new discovery. During periods of heavy rain, streams flowing across the hills above Waitomo disappear into sinkholes and natural openings before continuing their journey beneath the surface. Some underground rivers eventually re-emerge many miles away, while others join larger waterways hidden within the limestone. Scientists studying these systems sometimes use harmless tracing dyes to understand exactly where the water travels, revealing unexpected connections between distant cave passages. These studies not only improve geological knowledge, but also help protect local water supplies and the delicate ecosystems that depend upon clean groundwater. Standing above Waitomo today, it is difficult to imagine the remarkable landscape concealed below. Children play in grassy fields. Farmers tend livestock, much as previous generations have done for decades. Birds sing from nearby trees, and gentle breezes ripple across the hills. Beneath that peaceful countryside, however, an entirely different world continues its quiet existence. Rivers flow through darkness without ever seeing the sun. Limestone formations continue growing by almost immeasurable amounts each year. Glowworms illuminate cavern ceilings with living blue light, carrying on a life cycle that has repeated itself for countless generations. The surface and the underground exist side by side, connected by rainwater slowly filtering through the rock, yet separated by experiences so different they seem to belong to entirely different worlds. The Waitomo region reminds us that some of Earth's greatest natural wonders remain hidden from view, revealing themselves only to those willing to look beneath the surface. While towering mountains and vast waterfalls command attention from great distances, these caves ask something different. They invite patience, quiet observation, and an appreciation for processes so gradual that they can scarcely be measured within a single lifetime. Every glowing ceiling, every limestone column, and every winding underground river represents millions of years of uninterrupted natural history. The journey through Waitomo is not simply a visit to a famous tourist destination. It is an opportunity to witness the remarkable results of time itself, working patiently beneath the hills long before people ever knew such a place existed. Although millions of people have visited Waitomo over the past century, the experience inside the caves has changed remarkably little. Modern visitors may arrive by car or tour bus instead of horseback or early railway, yet once they step beyond the entrance, the pace immediately slows. Electric lights are used only where necessary to safely guide people through the chambers. Walkways follow routes carefully chosen to protect delicate formations, and before long, the familiar sounds of the outside world begin to disappear. The hum of engines, distant conversations, and even the rustling of leaves give way to something much quieter. The steady rhythm of dripping water replaces them, echoing softly from limestone walls that have reflected those same sounds for countless generations. The final portion of the traditional tour takes place aboard a small boat. Unlike many cave attractions around the world, there are no motors to disturb the silence. Instead, guides move the boats using a system of overhead ropes that has been in place for many years. By gently pulling the boat along these suspended guidelines, They allow visitors to drift almost effortlessly across the underground river without creating waves or unnecessary noise. The motion is smooth enough that many people later describe the experience as floating rather than boating. Without the vibration of an engine, every sound becomes more noticeable. A single droplet striking the water can echo through the chamber. The quiet splash of the boat settling against the current becomes part of the cave itself. As the boat glides deeper into the grotto, artificial lighting gradually fades until only the glowworms remain visible overhead. Human eyes require several moments to fully adjust to the darkness, and during that brief transition, the cave seems to disappear altogether. Then, almost imperceptibly, small blue points begin emerging above the passengers. At first, there are only a handful. A few more become visible farther into the distance. Within seconds, thousands fill the ceiling from one end of the chamber to the other. The effect is so convincing that many first-time visitors instinctively look for familiar constellations before realizing they are not looking at the night sky at all. They are gazing at living insects suspended only a short distance overhead. One of the reasons the display feels so extraordinary is the absence of competing light. On the surface, even the darkest countryside contains reflections from the moon, distant towns, or passing vehicles. Inside the glowworm grotto, there is nothing to dilute the blue illumination. Every point of light appears sharp against the surrounding darkness. The underground river doubles the effect by reflecting the glowing ceiling like a perfectly polished mirror. Looking downward reveals another galaxy beneath the boat, nearly identical to the one above. The true ceiling and its reflection merge into a single breathtaking scene, making the chamber seem far larger than its actual dimensions. Many visitors later say they struggle to describe the experience to friends and family. Photographs rarely capture the feeling accurately, even when taken under carefully controlled conditions. Cameras often exaggerate the brightness of the glow or fail to reproduce the immense depth created by the reflections. The sensation of drifting silently through complete darkness, surrounded by thousands of tiny living lights, depends on much more than appearance alone. It is the stillness, the cool air, the quiet movement of the water, and the knowledge that this remarkable display is entirely natural that leaves such a lasting impression. For many travelers, Waitomo becomes one of those rare places that feels even more extraordinary in person than it does in photographs. That sense of wonder has inspired generations of artists, writers, filmmakers, and scientists. Nature photographers have spent years attempting to capture the delicate blue glow without disturbing the insects. Biologists continue studying the remarkable chemistry behind the glowworms' bioluminescence, hoping to better understand both their behavior and the evolutionary advantages that led to such an unusual adaptation. Geologists use the caves as a natural laboratory for observing how limestone landscapes continue changing over time, while hydrologists study the underground rivers to better understand groundwater movement throughout the region. A single visit to Waitomo may last less than an hour, but the scientific questions raised by the caves have occupied researchers for decades. For the Maori people, however, the significance of Waitomo extends beyond science or tourism. The caves are part of a cultural landscape that connects generations through stories, traditions, and a deep understanding of the natural world. Local iwi, or tribes, have long regarded the region as more than simply an interesting geological feature. Knowledge of the caves was passed through families, preserving both practical information about the landscape and the cultural identity tied to it. Today, many descendants of those early communities continue playing an important role in protecting and sharing the history of Waitomo, ensuring that visitors learn not only about the caves themselves, but also about the people who have known them for centuries. This partnership between conservation, science, tourism, and Maori stewardship has helped preserve Waitomo remarkably well. Every decision made inside the caves balances public access with long-term protection. The number of visitors is carefully managed, research continues throughout the year, and improvements are introduced only after careful study. The goal is not simply to preserve the caves as they appear today, but to ensure they remain healthy for generations still to come. After all, the limestone formations continue growing, the underground rivers continue flowing, and the glowworms continue beginning new life cycles every day. Waitomo is not a museum frozen in time. It is a living landscape, quietly evolving, just as it has for millions of years. As visitors eventually emerge back into the sunlight, many find themselves looking across the peaceful green hills with a renewed sense of appreciation. The countryside appears much the same as it did before entering the caves, yet it now carries an entirely different meaning. Beneath every pasture and every winding country road lies an ancient world of flowing water, growing stone, and tiny blue lights that continue shining in the darkness, unseen by everyone above. It is a reminder that some of Earth's greatest wonders remain hidden beneath ordinary landscapes, patiently waiting for those curious enough to look below the surface and discover the remarkable stories that time has written in stone. The hidden world beneath Waitomo has inspired countless comparisons over the years. Some visitors say the glowing ceiling resembles the Milky Way on a cloudless winter night. Others compare it to floating beneath a field of stars, reflected across a perfectly still lake. A few describe it as entering another planet altogether, where familiar ideas about sky, earth, and water no longer seem to apply. Yet none of these comparisons capture the complete experience, because nothing quite prepares a person for seeing living light suspended in absolute darkness. It is one of those rare places where the imagination falls slightly short of reality. No photograph can recreate the gentle movement of the boat, the cool air drifting through the cavern, or the feeling of silence that seems almost tangible. The cave encourages people to slow down without ever asking them to do so. Minutes pass differently underground. Without sunlight, clocks, or changing weather, there is little to measure time except the quiet rhythm of the river and the occasional drop of water falling from the ceiling. That timeless quality is perhaps the greatest gift Waitomo offers. Modern life moves quickly, roads become busier, cities continue expanding, and technology places information from around the world into our hands within seconds. Inside the caves, however, none of those changes seem to matter. The limestone surrounding the visitors formed long before human civilization existed. The underground river has followed nearly the same course for thousands upon thousands of years. Every stalactite overhead continues growing at a pace almost too slow to comprehend. The glowworms neither know nor care about calendars, economies, or the constant pace of life above ground. Their existence is governed by moisture, darkness, and the steady arrival of tiny insects drifting through the cave. For a brief time, visitors become part of that slower rhythm, experiencing a world where patience rather than speed has shaped everything they see. Scientists often describe caves as natural archives because they preserve evidence of Earth's history with remarkable accuracy. Every layer of limestone records ancient oceans that disappeared millions of years ago. Mineral deposits reveal periods of wetter or drier climates. Even the growth patterns inside stalactites can provide clues about changing environmental conditions over enormous spans of time. By carefully studying these formations, researchers are able to reconstruct aspects of New Zealand's ancient climate long before weather records existed. In this way, Waitomo is not only a beautiful destination, but also a valuable scientific resource, quietly preserving information that would otherwise have been lost forever. The cave serves as both a natural wonder and a history book written not with ink or paper, but with water and stone. The glowworms themselves continue raising new scientific questions. Researchers still investigate how individual larvae regulate the intensity of their light, how they choose the locations where they build their silk nests, and how environmental changes influence their hunting success. Advances in microscopic imaging and genetic analysis have revealed details that early naturalists could scarcely have imagined, yet much about these remarkable insects remains unknown. Every discovery leads to new questions, reminding scientists that even one of New Zealand's most famous attractions still holds mysteries waiting to be explored. That ongoing sense of discovery has helped keep Waitomo at the center of biological and geological research for generations. Conservation has become increasingly important as awareness of the caves has grown around the world. Managing a destination visited by hundreds of thousands of people each year requires careful planning. Even small changes can have lasting consequences inside such a delicate environment. Excessive artificial lighting may encourage unwanted algae to grow on limestone formations, gradually changing their appearance. Changes in airflow can alter humidity. Increased carbon dioxide from large crowds may influence the slow chemical processes responsible for forming stalactites and stalagmites. Every decision regarding pathways, lighting, tour schedules, and visitor numbers is guided by years of scientific observation. The goal is simple in principle, but challenging in practice. Allow people to experience one of Earth's great natural wonders while leaving the cave as undisturbed as possible. This philosophy has helped preserve not only the famous glowworm grotto, but also the surrounding landscape above ground. Native forests continue protecting the hillsides, filtering rainfall before it enters the limestone below. Healthy vegetation reduces erosion, maintains water quality, and supports the countless small insects upon which the glowworms depend. Conservation therefore extends well beyond the cave entrance. Protecting Waitomo means caring for an entire ecosystem that stretches from the forest canopy to the deepest underground rivers. Every tree, stream, and patch of native vegetation plays a role in maintaining the delicate balance that has developed over millions of years. Visitors often leave Waitomo with a deeper appreciation for the quiet forces that shape our planet. Popular imagination frequently celebrates dramatic natural events such as volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, or powerful storms. Waitomo tells a different story. Its beauty was created through persistence rather than violence. Gentle rainfall dissolved limestone one microscopic layer at a time. Tiny marine organisms built the rock itself through countless generations. Minute mineral deposits slowly formed graceful stone sculptures. A small insect evolved the ability to produce blue light, transforming darkness into something unforgettable. None of these processes attracted attention while they were happening. Only after millions of years did their combined work become visible as one of the world's most extraordinary underground landscapes. Long after the last tour boat returns to its dock each evening, the caves continue exactly as they always have. Water keeps flowing through hidden channels beneath the hills. Fresh mineral crystals settle onto growing formations. Glowworms lower new silk threads into the darkness while waiting for the next tiny insect to drift past. Somewhere deep within the cave network, droplets continue falling into silent pools, exactly as they did before the first people ever entered these chambers. The surface world grows quiet as night settles across the Waikato countryside, but beneath the rolling green hills, millions of tiny living lights continue shining patiently, illuminating an underground world that has endured through immense stretches of time and will, with careful protection, continue inspiring wonder for countless generations still to come. Far beyond the guided pathways and carefully managed tour routes, the Waitomo region still holds an air of mystery that continues to attract explorers and scientists alike. Although more than 300 caves have been identified throughout the surrounding limestone landscape, researchers believe there are likely additional passages that have yet to be fully explored or connected to the existing network. The underground world is constantly changing, not through dramatic events, but through the same quiet geological forces that have shaped it for millions of years. Water continues searching for the path of least resistance, dissolving microscopic amounts of limestone as it flows through tiny fractures that may one day become new tunnels or hidden chambers. The process is so slow that no visitor could ever notice the changes during a lifetime, yet given enough time, the caves of the future may look very different from those we see today. Modern technology has transformed the way researchers study these underground landscapes. Laser scanners can measure cave chambers with extraordinary precision, producing detailed three-dimensional maps that reveal every curve and contour of the limestone walls. Drones are of little use underground, but compact robotic instruments and sophisticated surveying equipment allow scientists to document passages that would once have required weeks of careful measurements using tape, compass, and notebook. Even with these remarkable tools, however, the cave system continues to surprise those who study it. Flooded tunnels sometimes reveal previously unknown connections between distant chambers, while careful geological analysis uncovers evidence of ancient rivers that once flowed through passages now left completely dry. Water remains the greatest challenge for explorers. During periods of heavy rainfall, streams flowing across the Waikato countryside quickly disappear into sinkholes and natural openings, feeding the underground rivers that wind through the limestone. While these rivers are usually calm, prolonged storms can raise water levels dramatically, temporarily flooding lower passages and altering the routes available to researchers. Cave explorers carefully monitor weather forecasts before entering the system because conditions underground often reflect rainfall that occurred many miles away. A river that appears perfectly peaceful in the morning can rise significantly later in the day as water gradually makes its way through the hidden drainage network beneath the hills. The relationship between the surface and the underground world is closer than many visitors realize. Every drop of rain that falls onto the forests, farmland, and hills surrounding Waitomo begins a journey that may eventually carry it through the caves themselves. Along the way, that water filters through soil, absorbs minerals from the limestone, nourishes underground ecosystems, and contributes to the slow formation of stalactites and stalagmites. The health of the cave therefore depends not only on what happens inside it, but also on the condition of the landscape above. Responsible farming practices, careful land management, and the protection of native vegetation all help preserve the quality of the groundwater flowing beneath the region. It is a reminder that even hidden environments remain deeply connected to the world above them. One of the most fascinating aspects of Waitomo is how many different scientific disciplines intersect within a single location. A geologist examining limestone formations may work alongside a hydrologist studying groundwater movement. Nearby, an entomologist observes the behavior of glowworms, while a conservation specialist measures humidity and carbon dioxide levels inside the cave. Biologists, chemists, climatologists, and environmental scientists each find something valuable within the same underground landscape. Few places offer such a remarkable combination of living ecosystems and geological history preserved together in one setting. Every chamber tells multiple stories at once, each viewed through the perspective of a different branch of science. Visitors often remember the glowworms first, but many guides quietly hope they leave with something even more meaningful. The blue lights are certainly unforgettable, yet they represent only the final chapter of a much longer story. Before a single glowworm could hang its first silk thread, ancient seas had to deposit enormous layers of marine sediments. Those sediments needed millions of years to become limestone. The limestone then required millions more years of patient erosion before underground chambers large enough to support an entire ecosystem could develop. Only after all of those events had unfolded could the glowworms evolve within the stable darkness that made their remarkable hunting strategy possible. Every glowing insect overhead depends upon geological events that began tens of millions of years before its own species ever existed. Perhaps that is what makes Waitomo feel so different from many other famous destinations. It is not defined by a single spectacular moment in history or by the achievements of human civilization. No architect designed its vaulted ceilings. No engineer planned the course of its underground rivers. No artist arranged the glowing lights overhead. Everything inside the cave emerged through natural processes, operating with extraordinary patience across unimaginable lengths of time. Human beings eventually learned to appreciate what had already been created, but nature itself remained the true architect. As visitors step back into the daylight, their eyes gradually readjust to the brightness of the New Zealand countryside. The rolling hills appear unchanged from when the journey began. Sheep continue grazing across open fields, native birds move through nearby forests, and gentle breezes ripple across the grass. Yet the landscape rarely looks quite the same after leaving the caves. Beneath those peaceful hills lies an ancient world that most travelers passing along the nearby roads will never see. Rivers continue flowing silently through darkness. Limestone formations continue growing one mineral-rich droplet at a time. New generations of glowworms hatch, build their delicate silk threads and illuminate the underground chambers with tiny blue lights that have inspired wonder for generations. The story of Waitomo reminds us that some of Earth's greatest wonders are not the tallest, the widest, or the most dramatic. Instead, they are places that reward curiosity, patience, and careful observation. Hidden beneath an ordinary landscape, shaped by quiet forces almost impossible to perceive within a human lifetime, the Waitomo glowworm caves stand as a remarkable example of what nature can create when given enough time. Millions of years transformed an ancient seabed into a living underground constellation, proving that even the smallest creatures, working within the oldest landscapes, can create memories that remain with people long after they have returned to the surface. The Waitomo glowworm caves have become one of New Zealand's most recognizable natural attractions, yet they represent only a small part of the country's extraordinary geological story. New Zealand itself sits along the boundary of the Australian and Pacific tectonic plates, making it one of the most geologically active places on Earth. Towering mountain ranges continue rising, volcanoes reshape the landscape, earthquakes remind residents that the land is still moving, and glaciers slowly carve valleys across the South Island. Amid all of this dramatic activity, Waitomo stands apart. It was not created by fire or violent upheaval, but by one of nature's gentlest forces. Rainfall, dripping one drop at a time, accomplished what no earthquake or volcanic eruption could have achieved. Over millions of years, those tiny droplets patiently sculpted an underground masterpiece hidden beneath an otherwise peaceful countryside. It is a reminder that the greatest changes on Earth are not always the fastest. Sometimes they are the quietest. This quiet process continues even today. Every time rain falls across the Waikato region, fresh water begins filtering through layers of soil before reaching the limestone below. Along the way, it absorbs a small amount of carbon dioxide from decaying plant material, creating the weak carbonic acid responsible for slowly dissolving the rock. Although the chemical reaction is incredibly mild, it has never truly stopped. The same natural process that began enlarging tiny fractures millions of years ago is still active beneath the hills. New passages continue developing on a microscopic scale, existing tunnels slowly widen, and fresh mineral deposits continue forming wherever water emerges into open air. Visitors often imagine the caves as ancient relics from a distant past, yet they remain active geological systems that continue evolving with every rainfall. Scientists sometimes compare limestone caves to living landscapes because they are never completely finished. Rivers may change direction over thousands of years, abandoning one passage while creating another. Mineral-rich water may begin dripping from a different crack in the ceiling, gradually forming an entirely new stalactite where none previously existed. Occasionally, a section of ceiling may collapse naturally, opening a larger chamber or creating fresh routes for underground streams. Such changes occur so slowly that they escape human notice, but they demonstrate that Waitomo is not frozen in time. Instead, it continues responding to the same natural forces that have shaped it for millions of years. The glowworms also remind us how closely evolution is connected to environment. Their remarkable ability to produce light did not develop simply because glowing is beautiful. It evolved because darkness created an opportunity. Inside a cave where almost no light exists, producing even a faint blue glow gives the larvae a significant advantage when attracting flying insects. Over countless generations, individuals with more effective light-producing abilities were more successful at finding food and surviving long enough to reproduce. Gradually, natural selection refined that ability until it became one of the most efficient hunting strategies found anywhere in the insect world. Visitors understandably admire the beauty of the glowing ceiling, but beneath that beauty lies a sophisticated evolutionary adaptation shaped over immense spans of time. The cave also offers an important reminder that nature often depends upon balance rather than abundance. Too little moisture would cause the silk threads to dry and lose their effectiveness. Too much flowing water could wash away larvae attached to the ceiling. Significant temperature changes might affect insect activity throughout the cave, reducing the availability of prey. Every aspect of the glowworm's life depends upon remarkably stable conditions that have remained largely unchanged beneath the limestone for thousands of years. This delicate balance explains why conservation efforts focus so carefully on protecting not just the glowworms themselves, but the entire cave environment in which they live. Many visitors leave Waitomo with a deeper appreciation for time itself. Human history often measures events in decades or centuries. Nations rise and fall. Buildings are constructed and replaced. Entire civilizations appear within periods that seem significant from our own perspective. The caves quietly place those familiar timelines into a much larger context. 30 million years ago, the limestone was still forming beneath a tropical sea. Millions of years later, underground rivers began carving chambers through the rock. Long afterward, glowworms evolved their remarkable bioluminescent display. Only within the most recent moments of that enormous story did people arrive to witness what nature had already created. Standing inside Waitomo offers a rare opportunity to experience geological time, not as an abstract number, but as something visible in every wall, every stalactite, and every glowing point of blue light above the river. Perhaps that is why so many people remember the caves long after returning home. The experience is certainly beautiful, but beauty alone does not fully explain its lasting impression. Waitomo encourages a different way of thinking about the natural world. It reveals how patient Earth can be, how even the smallest living creatures may depend upon events that began millions of years before their existence, and how landscapes that appear ordinary on the surface may conceal extraordinary worlds beneath them. Every visitor who quietly drifts beneath the glowing ceiling becomes part of a story that began long before humanity and will likely continue far into the future. Long after the final tour of the day leaves the underground river, silence once again settles over the chambers. The guide ropes remain motionless above the water. Reflections shimmer faintly beneath thousands of tiny blue lights. Fresh droplets continue forming along the tips of stalactites before falling into dark pools below. Hidden among the limestone, countless glowworms wait patiently with their delicate silk threads suspended in the still air, each tiny light contributing to a living constellation that has inspired wonder for generations. Above them, the green hills of New Zealand grow quiet beneath the evening sky, while below, one of Earth's most remarkable natural spectacles continues exactly as it has for thousands of years, illuminated not by the stars of the heavens, but by thousands of small lives, quietly glowing beneath the ancient stone. Even after more than a century of welcoming visitors, Waitomo continues to inspire the same sense of curiosity that greeted the earliest explorers. Scientific knowledge has expanded enormously since Tani Tinarau and Fred Mace first floated through the darkness by candlelight, yet standing beneath the glowing ceiling still evokes many of the same questions. How could such a small insect produce such remarkable light? How long did it take for the cave to form? What other hidden passages remain beyond the reach of today's visitors? Every generation arrives with better equipment and a deeper understanding of the natural world, but the caves continue reminding us that there is always more to discover. Nature rarely reveals every answer at once, and perhaps that enduring mystery is part of what has made Waitomo so captivating for well over 100 years. The caves have also become an important part of New Zealand's identity. Travel magazines, nature documentaries, and guidebooks frequently feature the glowing grotto among the country's most iconic destinations, alongside Milford Sound, Aoraki Mount Cook, Rotorua's geothermal landscapes, and the towering forests of the North Island. For many international visitors, a journey to Waitomo becomes one of the highlights of an entire trip across New Zealand. Some arrive after months of planning, while others discover the caves almost by chance during a road trip through the Waikato countryside. Regardless of how they arrive, many leave describing the experience in remarkably similar ways. Words such as peaceful, unforgettable, magical, and surreal appear again and again in visitor journals and travel accounts. Although each person witnesses the same cave, the memory they carry away often feels deeply personal, shaped by the quiet atmosphere as much as by the glowing lights themselves. The surrounding region has embraced that connection between tourism and conservation. Local communities recognize that the caves are not simply an attraction, but also an irreplaceable natural resource deserving careful stewardship. Tourism provides employment for guides, researchers, hospitality workers, conservation specialists, and many local businesses, while the continued health of the caves depends upon protecting the very qualities that draw people there in the first place. It is a partnership built upon respect rather than exploitation. Every visitor contributes to preserving the landscape by supporting the ongoing work required to monitor water quality, maintain pathways, study the glowworm population, and ensure that future generations inherit the caves in the same remarkable condition enjoyed today. Around the world, there are many famous caves celebrated for their immense size, colorful mineral formations, or underground lakes. The Carlsbad Caverns in the United States contain enormous chambers capable of holding skyscrapers. Vietnam's Sun Dung Cave is so vast that sections contain their own forests and weather systems. Slovenia's Postojna Cave stretches for many miles beneath the karst plateau, while Mammoth Cave in Kentucky remains the longest known cave system on Earth, with hundreds of miles of mapped passageways. Waitomo does not compete by being the largest or the longest. Its distinction comes from offering something found nowhere else in quite the same way. The combination of ancient limestone caverns, a peaceful underground river, and thousands of glowing larvae suspended above the water creates an experience that is uniquely its own. It reminds us that greatness is not always measured by size. Sometimes it is defined by rarity, atmosphere, and the quiet sense of wonder a place inspires. As evening settles across the Waikato countryside, The landscape above the caves gradually changes with the fading light. Shadows lengthen across the hills, native birds grow quieter, and cool air begins moving through the valleys. Beneath the surface, however, almost nothing changes at all. The caves know neither sunrise nor sunset. Temperatures remain steady. The underground river continues flowing with unhurried patience. Water keeps gathering along the tips of stalactites before falling silently onto the formations below. The glowworms remain suspended from the ceiling, lowering fresh silk threads and illuminating the darkness with the same soft blue light that has guided their survival for countless generations. Day and night belong to the world above. Deep within Waitomo, time follows a different rhythm. Perhaps the greatest lesson these caves offer is one of perspective. Human beings naturally think in terms of years, careers, and generations. We celebrate anniversaries, remember important dates, and measure our lives against the passing decades. Waitomo gently encourages a much broader view. Every limestone wall records events from an ocean that vanished millions of years ago. Every stalactite reminds us that extraordinary beauty can emerge from changes too slow to notice from one day to the next. Every glowworm demonstrates that even the smallest creatures can play an essential role within a much larger natural story. Looking upward at thousands of tiny blue lights, it becomes easier to appreciate that our own place in Earth's history is only a brief moment within an unfolding story that stretches far beyond any single lifetime. For travelers fortunate enough to experience this hidden world, the memory often lingers long after the journey home. They may forget the exact length of the tour or the number of steps leading into the cave, but they remember looking upward into what seemed like an underground galaxy. They remember the remarkable silence. They remember the gentle movement of the boat and the feeling that, for a little while, the busy pace of the outside world had faded away. Those memories continue traveling with them, just as stories of Waitomo have spread from one generation to the next, since the caves first became known beyond the hills of the Waikato. And beneath those quiet green hills, where ancient limestone still shelters winding rivers and patient glowworms continue shining in the darkness, the story goes on. Rain continues falling from the New Zealand sky, beginning another slow journey through the rock. Mineral-rich droplets continue adding microscopic layers to formations that will outlive civilizations. New glowworms hatch, build their delicate silk threads, and illuminate the cave ceiling for the first time. Visitors continue arriving from every corner of the world, quietly looking upward in wonder at a living constellation that exists nowhere else on Earth. Hidden beneath an ordinary landscape, one of nature's most extraordinary creations continues its patient work, reminding us that some of the greatest wonders are not found by looking toward the sky, but by following the water beneath our feet into the timeless darkness below. Although the glowworms receive most of the attention, local guides often explain that the true star of Waitomo is time itself. Every remarkable feature inside the caves exists because nature refused to hurry. The limestone required millions of years to form beneath an ancient sea. Rainwater then spent millions more years dissolving narrow cracks into winding tunnels and broad chambers. Mineral-rich droplets patiently built stalactites and stalagmites, one crystal at a time, while generations of glowworms adapted to a world of permanent darkness. None of these changes happened quickly enough for a person to witness. Instead, they accumulated so gradually that each generation inherited a landscape only slightly different from the one before it. Looking around the cave, it becomes clear that some of Earth's greatest masterpieces were created not through dramatic events, but through extraordinary patience. That patience is visible everywhere. A single droplet of water forms at the tip of a stalactite before falling into the darkness below. To the eye it seems insignificant, disappearing almost as soon as it lands. Yet over thousands of years, those individual droplets leave behind enough dissolved calcite to reshape an entire chamber. The same process has been repeating continuously since long before the first humans arrived in New Zealand. Water never grows tired, never works faster, and never pauses to admire its own progress. It simply continues, following gravity through the limestone exactly as it has for countless ages. The result is an underground landscape where every curve, every column, and every delicate formation represents the accumulated work of uncountable millions of tiny moments. Visitors often ask whether the glowworms shine continuously throughout the day. The answer is both yes and no. Because the caves remain in darkness regardless of the time outside, the larvae can glow whenever conditions favor hunting. Their brightness changes according to their needs. A well-fed larva may produce a softer glow, conserving energy until another meal is needed. A hungry individual often shines more intensely, increasing its chances of attracting insects. This subtle adjustment happens constantly across the cave ceiling. While one glowworm brightens, another may dim. Countless tiny decisions are taking place simultaneously, creating a living display that is never exactly the same twice. Even though the overall appearance remains familiar, no two visits to Waitomo are completely identical. Guides who spend years working inside the caves gradually become familiar with details that most visitors never notice. They learn to recognize slight seasonal changes in water flow after periods of heavy rain. They observe how different sections of the cave respond to changing humidity. Some even become so accustomed to the glowworm colonies that they can identify areas where populations have grown or shifted over time. Although scientific instruments provide precise measurements, experienced guides often develop an equally impressive understanding simply through careful observation. Walking the same passages day after day teaches them to notice changes that would be invisible to someone visiting for the first time. Their familiarity with the cave reflects another kind of patience, one measured not in millions of years, but in decades of quiet attention. One of the most remarkable qualities of Waitomo is that it encourages people to look upward. In most caves, visitors naturally focus on the path ahead or the formations rising from the floor. At Waitomo, attention is almost immediately drawn to the ceiling. Human beings have looked toward the sky for thousands of years, using the stars for navigation, storytelling, and marking the changing seasons. Deep inside these caverns, that instinct remains surprisingly strong. The glowing larvae overhead create the unmistakable impression of a familiar night sky, even though several yards of solid limestone separate the cave from the real heavens above. For a brief moment, it becomes easy to forget whether you're looking toward the sky or deeper into the earth. That unusual sensation is one reason the experience remains so memorable. The still water below strengthens the illusion. Underground rivers often appear almost black because very little light reaches beneath their surface. Rather than revealing what lies below, they behave like polished glass, reflecting every glowworm with remarkable clarity. The result is a scene where stars seem to exist both above and below the boat. The true ceiling blends seamlessly with its reflection until the boundaries of the chamber become difficult to judge. It is easy to understand why so many visitors instinctively fall silent. The cave does not demand quiet through signs or rules alone. The landscape itself inspires it. Perhaps that feeling of silence explains why Waitomo leaves such a lasting impression long after the journey has ended. Visitors return home carrying photographs, souvenirs, and memories, but the strongest memory is often something much harder to describe. It is the realization that beneath an ordinary stretch of countryside exists a world almost entirely untouched by the hurried pace of modern life. Rivers continue following routes established long before people walk these hills. Stone continues growing at a pace measured in centuries. Tiny insects continue illuminating the darkness exactly as their ancestors did thousands of years ago. In a world where so much seems temporary, Waitomo offers a rare glimpse of processes that endure across immense stretches of time. Hidden beneath the green hills of New Zealand's North Island, this remarkable underground world continues its quiet work. Rain still filters through ancient limestone. New mineral crystals settle onto growing formations. Fresh generations of glowworms hatch, build delicate silk threads, and add their blue light to the living constellation above the river. Every visitor becomes part of only a brief moment in that story, while the caves themselves continue patiently shaping the future, just as they have shaped the past for millions of years. For many travelers, the memory of Waitomo changes over time. Immediately after leaving the caves, people often talk about the glowworms because they are the most obvious and unforgettable part of the experience. Days or weeks later, however, something different begins to stand out. They remember the quiet. They remember how cool the air felt after leaving the warmth of the New Zealand countryside. They remember the gentle movement of the boat as it drifted almost effortlessly along the underground river. Most of all, they remember the feeling of standing in a place that seemed completely separate from the outside world. In an age filled with constant noise and endless distractions, that sense of stillness has become increasingly rare. Waitomo offers something that cannot be purchased or manufactured. It offers an opportunity to experience nature moving at its own unhurried pace. That experience begins long before visitors ever step inside the cave. The journey through the Waikato countryside is part of the story itself. Roads wind through broad valleys bordered by rolling hills that have supported farming communities for generations. Sheep graze peacefully in open fields, dairy cattle wander across green pastures, and clusters of native trees provide shelter from the afternoon sun. Small towns appear every so often, each reflecting the relaxed pace of rural New Zealand. Nothing about the landscape suggests that one of the country's most famous natural attractions lies hidden beneath the ground. It is a reminder that extraordinary places do not always announce themselves with towering mountains or dramatic coastlines. Sometimes they remain quietly concealed beneath landscapes that appear perfectly ordinary. The surrounding forests also play an important role in protecting the cave system. Native trees and dense vegetation help regulate the flow of rainwater into the limestone below. Their roots stabilize the soil, reducing erosion while allowing water to filter naturally through the ground before entering the underground rivers. Leaves that fall to the forest floor gradually decompose, enriching the soil and contributing the carbon dioxide that allows rainwater to become slightly acidic. Without these forests, the slow geological processes responsible for shaping Waitomo would unfold differently. Even the smallest changes above ground can eventually influence the delicate environment hidden beneath the hills. The caves are therefore not isolated from the surrounding landscape, but deeply connected to it through the continuous movement of water. Water is the thread that links every chapter of Waitomo's story together. It carried the remains of tiny marine organisms to the old seabed, dissolved the limestone after the land rose above the sea, and still deposits the minerals that allow stalactites and stalagmites to grow. It also feeds the underground river that carries visitors beneath the glowworms and helps maintain the cool, humid conditions essential for their survival. Remove the water, and every part of the scene disappears. There would be no limestone chambers, no graceful mineral formations, no river passage, and no glowing ceiling. Few places show the patient power of water more clearly than Waitomo. Modern science has answered many questions about the caves, but not every mystery has been solved. Researchers continue studying how underground ecosystems respond to changing environmental conditions. They investigate how different species interact within the cave, how airflow influences humidity, and how the glowworms communicate through changes in their bioluminescence. Each discovery expands our understanding. Yet the more scientists learn about Waitomo, the more they appreciate the complexity within what first appears to be a simple underground river. The Maori people have long understood that remarkable places deserve respect as well as admiration. Throughout New Zealand, many natural landscapes are viewed not simply as beautiful destinations, but as places carrying deep cultural significance. Waitomo is no exception. Generations have cared for these caves, shared their stories, and recognized the importance of protecting them for those who would come later. That spirit of guardianship continues today through conservation efforts that balance tourism with preservation. Every carefully designed walkway, every limit placed on visitor numbers, and every scientific study contributes to ensuring that future generations will have the opportunity to experience the same sense of wonder that has greeted visitors for more than a century. Waitomo never stops changing, even though those changes are almost impossible to perceive. Somewhere inside the cave, a droplet of mineral-rich water is forming a crystal too small to see. Elsewhere, a newly hatched glowworm is spinning its first silk threads beneath the ceiling. A stream may be widening a crack in the limestone by a fraction of a millimeter. These events happen continuously, unnoticed by the people drifting through the grotto. Given enough time, they will shape the future of the cave, just as similar processes shaped its past. Waitomo reminds us that change does not always arrive with dramatic force. Sometimes it is almost invisible until time reveals what has happened. For many people, a visit to Waitomo becomes more than another stop on a travel itinerary. It is a reminder that some of the world's most memorable places are not visible from great distances. They wait beneath forests, deserts, mountains, and oceans, discovered only by those willing to look more closely. The caves show that beauty does not always announce itself with towering peaks or crashing waterfalls. Sometimes it exists in darkness, illuminated by creatures no larger than a grain of rice, living their entire lives below an ordinary stretch of countryside. It is a humbling thought that one of New Zealand's greatest natural treasures remained unknown to much of the world until the late 19th century. The Waitomo glowworm caves also remind us that every landscape has a story extending far beyond human history. Long before roads connected Auckland with the Waikato region, before the first Maori communities settled these valleys, before New Zealand became an island nation, and even before mammals came to dominate the earth, the foundations of these caves were already beginning to form beneath an ancient tropical sea. Few places allow visitors to experience such an enormous span of time within a single journey. Standing inside the caves means standing among rocks that preserve evidence of oceans that disappeared tens of millions of years ago, while watching living creatures whose ancestors adapted to this underground world long before the first explorers arrived with candles and handmade rafts. The relationship between people and the caves has also evolved over time. Early exploration focused simply on discovering where the passages led. Scientists later sought to understand how the caves formed and why the glowworms produced light. Modern conservation efforts ask a different question altogether. Instead of wondering how much can be explored, researchers and guides now ask how best to protect what already exists. That shift reflects a broader understanding that extraordinary places are not unlimited resources. Every generation inherits them from those who came before and carries the responsibility of preserving them for those who will follow. Waitomo has become an example of how tourism, scientific research, and conservation can work together when the long-term health of the environment remains the highest priority. Visitors spend only a short time inside the glowworm grotto, but the cave itself never truly rests. Throughout every hour of the day and night, tiny changes unfold beyond human notice. Water seeps through layers of limestone, carrying dissolved minerals that will one day become part of new formations. Underground streams polish the cave floor as they carry fresh water toward distant outlets. Young glowworms emerge from their eggs and begin searching for suitable places to build their silk nests, while older larvae prepare for their transformation into winged adults. Every part of the cave remains active, even when no one is there to witness it. Eventually, every visitor reaches the cave entrance once again. Daylight gradually grows brighter with each step upward, until the blue glow disappears behind them. Warm sunlight replaces the cool underground air, birdsong returns, and the familiar sounds of the countryside fill the landscape. The hills look much as they did before the journey began, calm and unassuming beneath the New Zealand sky. Yet they no longer seem ordinary. Knowing what lies below changes the way the landscape is seen, turning fields, forests, and country roads into the surface of a much larger world. Waitomo has earned worldwide recognition, but it remains only one chapter in New Zealand's natural history. Across the country, glaciers grind through mountain valleys, volcanoes shape the landscape, geothermal springs release steam from deep within the earth, and dense forests shelter plants and animals found nowhere else. Each destination tells a different story about the forces that form these islands. Waitomo's is among the most understated. There are no explosive eruptions, no towering waterfalls, and no dramatic cliffs. Its history was written by rain, limestone, and tiny living creatures, each contributing in ways almost impossible to notice from one day to the next. The caves also encourage people to think differently about darkness. In everyday life, darkness is often associated with uncertainty or absence. Inside Waitomo, it becomes essential to the experience. Without it, the glowworms could not hunt successfully. Without it, the blue lights would lose their magic. Without it, visitors would never experience the illusion of drifting beneath a sky filled with living stars. Rather than something to fear, the darkness becomes the canvas upon which one of nature's rare displays is painted. Another reason the glowworms have fascinated scientists for so many years is their bioluminescence, one of nature's most efficient forms of light production. Traditional electric light generates heat as well as illumination, wasting a portion of its energy. The chemical reaction inside a glowworm produces very little heat, converting energy into light with impressive efficiency. Researchers studying bioluminescence have long hoped that understanding these natural processes might eventually contribute to new technologies, from improved medical imaging to more energy-efficient lighting. Although the glowworms evolved this ability simply to attract prey, their biology continues inspiring scientific research far beyond the caves themselves. Young visitors are often surprised to learn that the insects glowing above them are not adults at all. Nearly the entire famous display comes from the larval stage of the animal's life. Once the adult fungus gnat finally emerges, it no longer glows and lives only a few short days. During that brief period, it does not even eat. Its sole purpose is to reproduce before the cycle begins again, with a new generation of eggs attached to the cave ceiling. Nature frequently surprises us in this way. The stage of life we notice most is sometimes only a small part of a larger process beyond our view. The glowworms themselves have no awareness that people travel across oceans to admire them. They simply follow instincts refined through countless generations. Each larva builds its silk threads, adjusts the brightness of its glow, captures passing insects, and gradually grows until it is ready to transform. Together, thousands of individuals create one of Earth's most recognizable natural spectacles without any intention of inspiring wonder. One of the world's celebrated attractions exists not because nature set out to entertain visitors, but because a tiny insect evolved an effective way to survive in permanent darkness. Across the ages that Waitomo has existed, the world above the caves has changed almost beyond recognition. Forests expanded and retreated as climates shifted. Giant flightless birds, known as moa, once wandered across New Zealand before eventually disappearing centuries after the arrival of people. Maori communities established villages, cultivated the land, and developed an intimate understanding of the rivers, forests, and limestone hills surrounding the cave entrances. European settlers later introduced roads, farms, and towns that transformed much of the countryside. Automobiles replaced horses, electricity reached rural communities, and aircraft eventually carried visitors from every continent to New Zealand. Through all of those changes, the underground world remained unusually constant. The glowworms continued illuminating the darkness as their ancestors had done for thousands of generations. A place receiving hundreds of thousands of visitors every year might seem likely to lose its sense of discovery. Waitomo has proven the opposite. People arrive expecting that they know what they are about to see because they have viewed photographs online or watched travel documentaries before making the journey. Yet many leave saying that nothing truly prepared them for the experience. Images can capture the appearance of the glowing ceiling, but they cannot reproduce the scale of the chamber, the coolness of the air, or the silence around the boat as it drifts beneath the lights. They cannot recreate the moment when human eyes adjust to the darkness and hundreds of tiny blue lights become thousands. Some experiences depend upon being present, and Waitomo remains one of them. Guides are often asked whether the glowworms are visible throughout the entire cave. The answer is no. Their colonies gather where conditions are most favorable, particularly in areas where humidity remains high, air movement is mild, and enough flying insects pass beneath the ceiling to provide a dependable source of food. Some sections of the cave contain only a scattering of glowing larvae, while others support dense colonies that create the displays for which Waitomo has become famous. This uneven distribution reflects the sensitivity of the insects to their environment. Even small differences in airflow or moisture can influence where they establish their silk nests. The glowworms also display a surprising degree of efficiency. They do not continuously rebuild their silk threads from the beginning. Instead, damaged threads are replaced only when necessary, conserving both energy and valuable resources. The sticky droplets coating the threads are renewed as they lose their effectiveness, allowing the larvae to maintain successful traps while minimizing unnecessary effort. Every aspect of their behavior reflects an economy of energy. Since food is never guaranteed inside the cave, survival depends upon making careful use of every opportunity. It is an elegant example of evolution, refining small behaviors over many thousands of generations. The underground river contributes to the success of the glowworms in ways that may not be immediately obvious. Calm water helps maintain stable humidity throughout the grotto while providing a reflective surface that deepens the visual effect of the glowing ceiling. Insects carried into the cave by air currents or flowing water eventually become food for the waiting larvae. During periods of heavier rainfall, increased water flow may transport additional organic material into the cave, influencing the entire ecosystem. Every element remains connected. The river shapes the cave shelters the glowworms, and the glowworms depend upon insects supported by the surrounding forests. Researchers studying Waitomo have occasionally compared the cave to a carefully functioning clock, not because its parts are mechanical, but because every component depends upon the others operating within a relatively narrow range of conditions. If humidity falls too low, the silk threads become less effective. If excessive algae begin growing because of unnecessary lighting, delicate cave formations may become discolored. If changes above ground reduce water quality, the effects eventually reach the underground ecosystem. Protecting Waitomo therefore requires understanding not just one species or one geological feature, but the relationships connecting everything from the forests above to the smallest larva suspended beneath the cave ceiling. That is why visitors often leave with a greater appreciation for the connections within nature. At first glance, the experience appears simple. A boat glides through a cave beneath thousands of glowing insects. Looking more closely reveals ancient oceans, geological uplift, flowing groundwater, chemical reactions, evolutionary biology, Maori history, scientific research, and modern conservation. Every glowing point overhead belongs to a chain of events that began more than 30 million years ago beneath a warm tropical sea. Very few places bring together so many chapters of natural history within a single journey. Inside Waitomo, there are details visitors rarely notice because their attention is naturally drawn toward the glowing ceiling. Along the edges of the underground river, the limestone walls reveal subtle marks left by flowing water. Smooth grooves show where currents once moved more swiftly than they do today. Rounded pockets in the rock hint at old whirlpools that polish the stone grain by grain. Thin mineral deposits shimmer where moisture seeps through the ceiling, adding new layers to formations that began growing long before human beings walked these islands. Every surface carries evidence of an ongoing process rather than a finished landscape. Waitomo is not a monument preserved from the past, it is an active environment. The clarity of the underground river often surprises geologists as well as visitors. Rainwater filtering through thick layers of limestone undergoes a gradual process of purification before reaching the cave. Soil and rock remove many suspended particles, allowing the water entering the passages to remain exceptionally clear under normal conditions. When illuminated by artificial lights during portions of the tour, the river sometimes appears almost invisible, revealing only small ripples moving across the surface. Once those lights disappear and the glowworms become the only source of illumination, the water turns into polished black glass, reflecting every point of blue light with astonishing precision. The river itself almost disappears, leaving the illusion of floating through open space between two separate skies. Many people wonder whether the glowworms ever interfere with one another's hunting. In fact, their arrangement across the cave ceiling reflects a careful balance. Larvae generally establish territories with enough space for their silk threads to hang freely without becoming tangled with neighboring traps. If too many glowworms gather in one small area, competition for food increases, reducing the chances that each individual will survive. Natural selection gradually favors those choosing locations where they have sufficient room to hunt effectively. Over many generations, this behavior has produced colonies that appear almost evenly distributed across favorable sections of the cave. What visitors see as a beautiful pattern is also an efficient arrangement shaped by competition and adaptation. Another important characteristic of Arachnocampa luminosa is its dependence on complete darkness. Even moderate levels of artificial light can influence the behavior of both the glowworms and the insects they depend upon for food. This is one reason guides carefully control lighting throughout the cave system. Bright lights remain on only where necessary for safe movement along walkways, while the glowworm grotto itself is kept as dark as possible. Protecting the natural lighting conditions allows the larvae to behave much as they would have long before tourism began. It also preserves the visual experience that has made Waitomo famous around the world. The cave's acoustics add another dimension to the journey. Sound behaves differently underground than it does in open air. Smooth limestone surfaces reflect even soft noises, allowing echoes to travel surprising distances through connected chambers. A whispered conversation can often be heard more clearly than expected, while louder sounds may linger briefly before fading. Experienced guides understand these acoustics well and naturally lower their voices, encouraging visitors to do the same. The resulting stillness is not simply a matter of courtesy. It becomes part of the landscape itself, helping the cave retain the atmosphere that has greeted explorers for generations. To researchers, caves like Waitomo provide more than beautiful scenery. They also offer valuable records of Earth's environmental history. Tiny layers within stalagmites preserve subtle chemical signatures left behind by ancient rainfall. By studying these layers, scientists can reconstruct patterns of climate stretching back thousands of years. Variations in mineral composition reveal periods when rainfall was heavier, temperatures were warmer, or vegetation above the caves changed. In this way, formations admired for their beauty also function as natural archives, recording environmental conditions long before written history began. Every stalagmite growing inside Waitomo contains a story that extends beyond the cave itself. Despite decades of scientific research, new discoveries continue emerging from the Waitomo region. Improvements in imaging technology allow researchers to examine mineral growth at microscopic scales, while advances in genetics provide deeper insight into the evolution of New Zealand's unique glowworms. Hydrologists map underground waterways to better understand how rainfall moves beneath the limestone hills, and conservation specialists evaluate how changing environmental conditions might influence the cave ecosystem in the decades ahead. Science has answered many questions about Waitomo, yet the caves still contain mysteries waiting to be explored. The glowworm grotto is often described as peaceful, but that sense of calm is the result of careful choices made over many decades. As tourism increased during the 20th century, those responsible for protecting Waitomo recognized that even small disturbances could have lasting consequences inside such a delicate environment. Unlike an open landscape, where wind, sunlight, and changing weather quickly disperse human activity, a cave responds much more slowly. Heat generated by large groups can subtly influence air temperature. Carbon dioxide released through normal breathing may accumulate in enclosed chambers. Excessive lighting encourages algae to grow on limestone formations that have remained unchanged for thousands of years. These changes may seem insignificant over a single day, but repeated thousands of times each year, they can alter the environment visitors have come to experience. Limiting the size of tour groups is one of the simplest and most effective conservation measures. Rather than allowing hundreds of people to enter the caves at once, visitors are guided through in carefully managed numbers. This approach helps preserve the atmosphere while also reducing changes in temperature and humidity inside the chambers. The slower pace gives everyone a better opportunity to appreciate the surroundings without feeling rushed. Guides are able to answer questions, point out details that might otherwise be overlooked, and ensure that each group experiences the underground river in much the same way as those who visited years before. The goal is to move through the cave while leaving as little trace as possible. Lighting has also become an important part of conservation. Modern LED systems produce far less heat than older bulbs, helping reduce unwanted environmental changes inside the cave. They are positioned carefully to illuminate walkways without overwhelming the darkness that defines the glowworm grotto. In many areas, lights are switched on only when tour groups approach and turned off again once they have passed. This conserves energy and helps maintain conditions closer to those that existed before artificial lighting was introduced. The chamber containing the glowworms remains especially dark because even moderate light can interfere with the insects' hunting behavior. Researchers monitor the cave throughout the year using instruments that collect information without disturbing visitors. Sensors measure temperature, humidity, and carbon dioxide concentrations, while others record water levels within the underground river. These observations allow scientists to detect gradual changes long before they become obvious to the human eye. If conditions begin shifting beyond expected ranges, managers can adjust tour schedules or introduce additional conservation measures to protect the ecosystem. In many ways, caring for Waitomo resembles caring for a living organism. Constant attention allows small problems to be addressed before they become larger ones. The glowworm population itself also receives careful study. Scientists regularly estimate colony sizes, observe breeding success, and monitor the availability of flying insects that provide food for the larvae. Because the glowworms occupy such a specialized habitat, they serve as sensitive indicators of the cave's overall health. A thriving colony suggests that humidity, temperature, airflow, and food supplies remain well balanced. Any significant decline could signal broader environmental changes requiring further investigation. Rather than focusing only on protecting a single species, researchers use the glowworms as one piece of a much larger picture that includes geology, hydrology, climate, and the surrounding landscape. Above ground, conservation extends across the hills that shelter the cave system. Native forests help regulate the movement of rainwater into the limestone below, reducing erosion while maintaining water quality. Landowners, conservation organizations, scientists, and local Maori communities work together to protect these catchment areas because they understand that healthy caves begin with healthy landscapes. Every stream flowing into the underground network begins as rainfall on the surface. Protecting that water before it enters the limestone is one of the most effective ways to preserve the fragile environment below. This partnership between science and stewardship has become one of Waitomo's greatest strengths. Researchers provide the knowledge needed to understand how the cave functions, while guides and conservation managers apply that knowledge in practical ways every day. Local Maori communities contribute generations of experience and a cultural tradition that emphasizes respect for the natural world. Together, these perspectives have helped ensure that millions of visitors can experience the caves without compromising the qualities that make them so distinctive. It is an approach increasingly studied by conservationists around the world, showing that responsible tourism and environmental protection can succeed together when guided by careful observation and long-term planning. Scientific work at Waitomo is still unfolding. Although the caves have welcomed visitors for well over a century and have been studied by geologists, biologists, hydrologists, and conservationists from around the world, they continue to reveal new details about the processes that shaped them. Scientists refine maps of the underground passages, monitor the health of the glowworm colonies, and study limestone formations for clues about New Zealand's past climate. Even now, sections of the cave system remain beyond the reach of ordinary visitors. The curiosity that first inspired Tain Tinarau and Fred Mace has not disappeared. It has evolved from candlelight and handmade rafts into careful scientific observation. The Waitomo glowworm caves are not important because they are the largest caves on Earth, or because they contain the tallest limestone formations ever discovered. Their significance comes from something much more difficult to measure. They offer an experience unlike almost anywhere else in the world, combining geology, underground rivers, unique wildlife, Maori history, and careful conservation into a single journey beneath the surface of the Earth. Every visitor sees the same glowing ceiling, yet each person leaves with a slightly different memory. Some remember the silence, others remember the reflections moving across the dark water. Many remember looking upward and feeling, if only for a few moments, as though they had drifted beneath a second night sky below the first. As evening settles across New Zealand's North Island, the last visitors return to the surface, country roads empty, and the rolling hills rest beneath the sky. Below those fields, mineral-rich droplets add new layers to slow-growing formations, and tiny glowworms lower their silk threads into the still air. Their living constellation shines on, unseen by the world above. It is a final reminder that some of Earth's greatest wonders are found in places that ask us to look more closely, listen more carefully, and notice what has been there all along. Thank you for listening to the Sleepy Mind channel. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Waitomo glowworm caves.